So good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for your interest in ADDOs activities. I will first introduce ADDOs, the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform that hosts this webinar, then myself, and our main speaker, Jipe Kelly. ADDOs is the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform. It's a European network of African diaspora development organizations based in Brussels. It engages and works with 85 countries. It's 27 EU countries. So because now you've got the EU countries plus Switzerland, the UK and Norway, and 55 African countries. It works through the delivery of services to diaspora organizations and individuals in Europe and Africa. Its aim is to improve and enhance the capacity and impact of the African diaspora organizations that are involved in development activities in Africa. In particular, ADDOs assists these ADDOs to optimize their development engagement in Africa, to professionalize their organizations, to create effective partnerships, to expand and improve their development activities in Africa, and also to influence the policy and practice of development cooperation. This aim is pursued through the delivery of services, and this webinar is a part of it, and especially with this thematic. As for myself, my name is Clara Chepeau, and I am the Capacity Development Manager within ADDOs, and I am responsible for the organization of these webinars. If you have any suggestions for the organization, or if you have any interest in future topics, do not hesitate to contact me in inbox or via ADDOs social media. I will now introduce Jipe Kelly, who will be our main speaker for today, if you agree, Jipe. So Jipe, you are a management consultant certified by the Institute of Management Consultants and Advisor. You have a Master of Business Studies in Cooperative and Social Enterprise, and you are the principal consultant at AfriDev Exchange. AfriDev Exchange is an independent consulting firm that specializes in developing approaches used by mission-driven organizations to work more creatively with stakeholders in the field of migration and development and generate greater social impact. You are also specialized in participatory tools and techniques, especially for projects aimed at advancing migration and development. And you are a PLA trainer within the National University of Ireland. I think that we can now start the webinar in itself, which is entitled Introduction to Participatory Learning and Action, PLA, Risk Management Techniques. For this time, the webinar will be held entirely in English. However, we will offer an online version with French subtitles in the coming weeks. So thanks for your attention, and Jipe, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clara, for that introduction. So what I will do, I will turn on my camera so that people can see me. Okay. Hello. Hi, everyone. So welcome again. I'm delighted to be asked to actually facilitate this webinar on the topic Introduction to Participatory Learning and Action, Risk Management Techniques and Tools for ADDOs. It's something that I like doing quite much, so I hope that it will be interesting. And specifically, I just want to outline that this webinar is intended to be interesting and participatory as much as possible. So if people have any specific questions, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask your questions.
Agreed.
Okay. In terms of the content of this webinar, it is actually divided into two parts. The first part will be looking at the potential risks that ADDOs are exposed to, and also the steps that can be taken to actually mitigate the risk. And the last part, second part, will be looking at how we can use participatory learning and action tools and techniques to mitigate the risk. So what do we understand by risk in the first place? I'm trying to, a moment. So as we know, risk is the likelihood that something unpleasant or unwelcome can happen. I know this is very generic, but in relation to ADDOs, it is the likelihood that something unpleasant which can actually maybe damage the reputation of the ADDO, and it can also threaten the continuity of the ADDO. So what this means is that we can't just see risks and sweep it below the carpet, hoping that it will go. No, it will never go. We have to actually address it. And it can arise from inaction as well as action. Action, for example, people who are those who are working with vulnerable groups. I know there are laws, legislations out there that maybe if they are involving volunteers in their activities, they have to vet the volunteers. And if there is a kind of negligence in which they involve volunteers who are not vetted, it may expose them to significant risk, particularly if they are working with vulnerable communities, vulnerable groups like children and the elderly. And action can be something that ADDO does that can trigger this kind of unpleasant or unwelcome behavior or action within the ADDO. So an example may be an ADDO firing volunteers or staff without actually considering or applying the due process. So we are going to look at the potential risk. As I said earlier, risk cannot be avoided, and non-profit organizations in particular are exposed to many risks due to the activities in which they are actually involved in, as I made mention earlier, working with vulnerable communities, but also the environment in which non-profit organizations exist is full of uncertainty, funding uncertainty, and the over-reliance on volunteers. So this can actually impact them. And there are a lot of risks, involved in all this. But the most important thing is that, or the good news is that most types of risk can actually be anticipated and even planned. And that is why we are here today. It is very important to put in place a kind of structured mechanism so that if a risk actually arises within the organization will be able to address it or manage the risk. So we look at now a list of potential risks which an organization like ADDO can actually expose to, and the impact that this risk can cause to the organization. So in this list, I've limited myself to risks related to management. There are quite a number of them: operational risks, environmental risks, financial risks. We'll not list them here today, but let's talk about the management risk. On the left-hand side, you have the potential risk, and on the right-hand side, you have the potential impact that this risk can cause to the organization. The first one is when an organization lacks direction and forward planning. So there are many risks that the organization is exposed to, like organization can drift from with no clear objectives or priorities or plans. There can be issues which are addressed within the organization, maybe addressed in a kind of piecemeal basis and with no strategic reference. The needs of beneficiaries may not be fully addressed, and there can be financial management difficulties, and all this may lead to a huge loss of reputation of the organization. Another one is when the governing body within another organization lacks skills, relevant skills and commitment. So the potential impact of this risk to the ADDO may be the organization may fail to achieve its purpose. Decisions may be made, that bypasses the governing body, and there can be resentment or apathy amongst staff and even volunteers who are working within the organization. And then the other thing is that there's poor value for money or service delivery. So an organization actually gets funding, to be able to provide these services to their target groups. And if they can actually, if they don't spend this money wisely, it may attract some kind of present, from funders and maybe from other stakeholders. Another potential risk that an organization like ADDO is exposed to is when the governing body is dominated by one or two individuals who may be connected. So what are the potential impact of this risk? Governing body cannot operate effectively as a strategic entity. Decisions are made outside of the governing body. Conflicts of interest and loyalty, because people tend to do things based on the person they are loyal to. They are loyal to the organization, an individual, and not the organization or the overall goal of the organization. The people tend to pursue a personal agenda within the organization, and there is a culture of secrecy and defense. And also, it can lead to arbitrary overriding of control mechanism, within the ADDO. Another potential risk that an ADDO can face would be governing body members benefiting personally from the organization, for example, through remuneration. And the potential impact this risk can have on the ADDO, reputation, moral, and ethos may be affected. There can be impact on overall control environment within the ADDO, and the organization is hampered in its ability to pursue own interests and agenda. So most of the times, when, for example, someone wants to claim like expenses within the organization, instead of looking at how the policy of maybe awarding this kind of policy, sometimes people turn a blind eye and tend to, because they are loyal to a particular member, they award these expenses without due considerations. Decisions may be made based on relevant considerations, and this can also attract some kind of regulatory actions. Another potential risk would be loss of key governing board members and key staff. And how can this actually impact an organization would be experience and skills may be lost, operational impact on key projects and priorities, loss of of contact base and corporate knowledge within the ADDO, complaints from service users, loss of significant contract or claims under the contract. And this can also lead to reputational risk. Now, as I said earlier, there are many risks. The ones that we've outlined here are just management risks. So there are operational risk, financial risk, compliance risk, environmental risk. And what I would like to emphasize here is that these risks that I've outlined here is not just like a one size fits all. I strongly advise that each ADDO should sit down and look at the risk which might be relevant to them, which might be relevant to them with respect to the strategic goals and objectives that they have been set out to achieve. So, part two of this presentation would be to look at how we can use the participatory learning and action tools and techniques to identify and address this risk. So basically, the process of mitigating risk within an organization is just like this diagram. As you can see, it entails identification of the risk, analyzing the risk, controlling the risk, and monitoring the risk. Let's look at it again keenly. Like, identification of risks doesn't only mean maybe naming the risks and leaving them at that stage. It also entails acquiring or establishing an understanding of each of the risks and an understanding on how serious that risk can actually impact the organization. And sometimes even establishing, is it a risk that is likely to occur soon or maybe later. and then analyzing the risk, putting in place control mechanisms. If the risk actually occurs, what are we going to do? And sometimes monitoring the risks. Sometimes you might be able to identify a risk, and you don't have the resources to actually address the risk at that particular moment, but there is a need that you may monitor the risk so that maybe in future, if you actually have the resources that addresses you, you'll be able to address it. So, as I said, this process is a kind of very meticulous. And so we put in place tools which can help you to identify, analyze, monitor, and control risk, seamlessly. So the tools are, as I said earlier, participatory learning and action-based. So one of them is risk brainstorming. So risk brainstorming is a fast and creative way of brainstorming risk and possible impacts. So usually when we are organizing a PLA risk management workshop, what we do, before the workshop, we prepare the hall, come up with a banner question. So we may decide that, okay, today we are looking at only risks that are related to management. So we prepare a banner question on risks that are related to management. And then we prepare pictures, we prepare, have like sticky notes, like flip charts and so on, even before participants start arriving. So we spread them around the table. So when participants arrive, we welcome them. So we introduce the banner question, and everybody will be clear on what we are there to do on that day. So we bring them over to the table where we have these materials, as I said earlier, photos, sticky notes, flip charts, and so on. We ask them to think about a management risk that can actually occur within the ADDO, and we ask them to take a photo that might actually reflect that risk that they have thought about. And sometimes go sit down and discuss with the neighbor on how the individual perceives that risk can be damaging to the organization. So when this is done, then we bring them together, and then one by one, people start, talking about the risk that they have reflected on and how it relates to the picture that they have chosen, from the lots. So what this helps, sometimes people can communicate ideas if they associate it with a picture, so they can communicate it very clearly. And sometimes people can acquire more understanding on an idea if it is associated with a picture. So most of the time, you see, there's a lot of discussion around the table. There's a lot of brainstorming, and it helps for people to understand, sorry, no, my phone. It helps people to understand ideas just beyond the way they look at it. And sometimes there's a lot of contribution, from all the participants. So as I said earlier, we use basic materials such as large sheets, newsprints, stickers, pictures, and markers. Sometimes we, like newspapers, we cut photos, and we have to be sure that the photos that we are, presenting are like cultural appropriate. We try to make sure that the pictures will not create some kind of anxiety or something unpleasant, to people. And that's the way we did. And most of the times, information that comes out can be very, very huge, in terms of understanding of the main concept. So after the risks have been brainstormed, and maybe before I go to the next tool that we use, so when brainstorming risks, we allow people to articulate it the way they perceive their own risk. So we don't do any refine, and we don't allow people to interrupt others, when they are articulating the way they see a particular risk, because there is a tool that we use to provide more understanding, or where others can actually come in to talk about a particular risk that has been perceived by someone. So after the risks have been brainstormed and posted on the flip chart with their respective photos, we start now by categorizing the risk. And this is a flexible way of arranging and clustering the risks and connecting them. So what we do is we look at because it is likely that about 2 or 3 persons or even more might identify a similar risk. So we try to cluster them together. And sometimes it is likely that risks that have been identified by different individuals, there can be a kind of connection with them. So we try to establish that connection, of this risk. And then we arrange them in a way that people can easily see them clearly and in a kind of visual way, as the photo that is on the right-hand side actually illustrates. And as I indicated earlier, there is a huge use of basic materials, like large sheets of papers, newsprint, stickers, pictures, and markers. And most of the times we actually paste them on the wall. So after we have actually categorized the risks, we have brainstormed the risks, we have categorized them. The next stage now is to score the risks. Scoring the risks entails giving importance to each of the risks that has been identified, the likelihood that the risk will occur within the organization, and if the risk actually occurs, how big is the damage that particular risk is going to cause to the organization. So we use a tool that risk scoring. So normally it's a kind of pie chart, but the pie chart is actually drawn by participants themselves on the table. So we provide them like tips of different colors, and we ask them to draw a big cycle, on the flip chart that is on the table. So they draw that cycle, and based on the risks that have been identified, we ask them to provide a portion, based on how they perceive the damage that they perceive that the risk will cause to the organization. And in separating the pies, on the chart, we don't use lines. We use materials, as I said, tapes, because most of the times, if there is a discussion on the table, people can narrow the shares, and sometimes they can increase it. It happens people, when someone can say, okay, and try to think of a particular risk, and maybe will come in and say, based on the way the risk has been presented and the way he perceives, he believes that that risk can cause more damage than another risk. And if the group agrees, they can decide, to increase the portion. And sometimes if they see that the risk may cause less damage, they can also narrow down the portion. So most of the times, the discussion, a lot of brainstorming around the table, and until when they agree, now that we move to the next level. So after we've done that, we do what we call the risk metrics. This metric, it shows a correlation between risk and the possible impact used for prioritizing the risk. As you can see the photo on this photo, so the arrow below to the right-hand side, it shows the chances that this risk might happen within the organization from low to high, and the vertical one, the negative impact that this risk might happen if it actually occurs. So if the chances that a risk can happen is high, and the impact that the particular risk will cause on the organization is also high, then we'll put it on we'll put it on the sticker note on the panel that is on the right-hand side, top right-hand side. You can see the red one. If the impact that a risk can cause on the organization is high, but the likelihood that this risk will occur is low. Then we'll put it on the left-hand side, on the top left-hand side, that is the yellow. And if the chances that this risk can occur in the organization is high, but the impact that it will cause to the organization is low, then we put it on the bottom right-hand side. So as you can see here, so it shows a clear picture on which risks needs to be addressed immediately. As you can see, the ones that have been in red, and those boxes are sticky notes, show that they have to be addressed. The action has to be taken immediately. And like the ones that are on the top left-hand side, there are risks that can cause huge impact on the organization, but the likelihood that this risk will occur is low. So there has to be a contingency plan on if it occurs, what the ADDO is going to do to actually mitigate it. On the ones that are on the bottom right-hand side, there is a likelihood that the chances of it happening is very high, but the impact that is going to cause on the organization if it happens is low. So the ADDO has to consider what they will do if they have to consider if they have to address it at that particular moment, or maybe the time that they will need to address it. And then the ones that the chances that they occur is low, and the impact that it will cause on the ADDO if it occurs is low, it doesn't mean that the ADDO has to throw it away. They have to keep it under review. They have to monitor it. So because a risk that has high chances of occurring now may have high chances of occurring tomorrow. So it is very important that it should be monitored. And as I indicated earlier, this use of just basic materials, to conduct this exercise. So what are the actual benefits of using this IPLA tools? We use IPLA, we have added intercultural, so intercultural participatory learning and action. So as you could see from the tools that I just presented, there's strong visual tools for group discussion and decision making and analysis. And they can help, fast and fair, produce fast and fair results. There's democratic participation. People are allowed to participate at their own way. And the use of interesting and colorful materials makes the whole process, interesting and fun. The tools stimulate a lot of discussion, and they actually engage participants. But these tools, sometimes only on flexible brainstorming, people can spend about 30 minutes or even more, because there's always a lot of discussion around the table. So it actually stimulates a lot of discussion, as I said. So there are good learning tools and highly educated educational process. As you can see, the ideal of using the intercultural participating learning and action is that it allows participants, people who participate in the process, to also learn, because there's a lot of meaning provided to each idea. So there's huge learning process, amongst not only the participants, but also the consultant who is actually facilitating the process. People are not put under any pressure to speak. It's not just like a round table where people are asked to speak one after the other. People can come in at any time and can withdraw at any time. So no pressure at all. The information can be moved, connected, and brought forward into other PLA techniques. So sometimes after doing the flexible, the brainstorming, and then maybe we move to categorization. If there is a need, we can go back to the brainstorming, maybe based on the ideas that are coming. If we need to provide more understanding on a particular idea, then we can go back to brainstorming. So there is no wrong and right way of doing. So we provide maximum flexibility, to move forward, or maybe sometimes to move backward in the process. the PLA itself, it doesn't disenfranchise participants. So people can participate effectively, irrespective of their ability to communicate or their literacy level. So as you can see, there is a use of big use of materials like photos. You know, sometimes we use objects, and people can actually articulate their ideas by associating them with those photos and objects. So it's a very, very important. It's a very, very hands-on process. You know, when working with groups of mixed literacy and communication level. So you can see here, this is one of the PLA workshops that we organize on risk management. As I said earlier, the banner questions, you know, as you can see, the colors one on the top, and as the charts were prepared, so we put them below each of the banner questions. So you can see, even on the floor, there is a lot of materials which have been produced. One thing that I would like to emphasize here is that when conducting a PLA risk management workshop, it is very important to provide time. One workshop can last for sometimes even 4 hours, and people don't get tired because there's a lot of interaction. And we don't only allow people to sit down while you're talking. Sometimes we move them to the wall, you know, for them to discuss about particular ideas, or maybe for them to make sense about some particular ideas. So that is the presentation. And as I said earlier, this presentation was meant to be interactive as much as possible. So I believe that people will have so many questions, you know, based on the presentation that has been made. And if people have questions, please feel free to ask them now. And I think there should be a box, a chat box too. If people don't want to ask them verbally, they can also type in their questions and we'll be able to answer them. Okay, time for questions.
Yes, thank you, Jipe, for this interesting presentation. It's an introduction, as you said, so I hope we will have the opportunity to go into more details in a live session, training session. And I think we have some questions, so I will invite all the participants who want to ask questions just to either unmute their microphone and just say it loud, or just type it in the chat box. For the ones who don't know maybe how to use GoToMeeting. Oh, we have a first person. Yeah, you can use the bubble in the screen, up in the screen, and type your question and send it to everyone. So hello, we've got the first person. If you have a first question, you can. Otherwise, I will start with one question. Okay, I will start and wait until the person writes his question. So the last picture was quite impressive. So we had a lot of data, a big room. And yeah, okay, we have the same question. You've got the first question. Who should participate in such exercise?
Okay, I think that's a very, very good question. As you saw that the process of managing risk, you know, entails identifying the risk, analyzing them, monitoring risk, and controlling risk. So it's not something that one person will sit down and do all that. In terms of who should participate in that exercise, I believe everyone who has a big stake within the organization, like the management committee. It can be also volunteers and staff who are working within the ADDO. But it's always very important for someone who has good knowledge about the organization. Not some people who do not have good knowledge about the organization may not be able to contribute to the process. But as I said earlier, it should involve like the management committee or the board. It should involve volunteers as well as staff who are, if the ADDO has staff who are working within the ADDO.
May I add something? Do you need to involve partners, for example? Because it can be risky also, because you will highlight the weaknesses of the organization.
No, not really. I think partners are there not to actually see where your weaknesses are. Some of them, many of them will be able to actually help you to address those weaknesses. To organizing that kind of session on itself, it shows a kind of positive, on the organization, that you are willing to identify maybe any risk that can occur, and then you are willing to put in place a mechanism to actually address it. So there are partners who maybe actually kind of help you to address some of the risks which have been identified.
Okay, yeah? It can help to build the trust.
You got another question? Yeah. No organization is too perfect. Okay, look at an example. For those who love soccer or who follow soccer, I think there has been on the news recently that Manchester City has been penalized that they will not participate in European football. So this is a very big organization, and this is something that they were this is something that they were supposed to put in place and they didn't put in place, or something that they neglected, So what I'm trying to say is that no organization is immune to risk, whether big or small, whether a social enterprise, a business enterprise, a non-profit organization, every organization is exposed to risk.
Okay, yeah? You've got another question. I don't know if you can see it. At which frequency should such risk matrix be updated?
At which frequency should such risk matrix should be updated? I would say it has to be an ongoing process, because as I said earlier, a risk, something that might be a risk that might be like it can impact organization highly today, but it may not occur. The likelihood that it can occur is low. It can change tomorrow. That the impact that it will cause on the organization will be high, and the likelihood that it will occur will be high. So it's very important to always review these metrics, and if there are any changes that needs to be made based on the growth of the organization, then the changes have to be made, accordingly.
Thank you. You've got another question. Questions are coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one for a starting organization, what are the most important elements it should focus on to minimize eventual risk? That is a very important one. Yeah. And for a starting organization, I believe a starting organization will at least have a management committee. Yeah, may not actually have staff, but they may have maybe about 4 persons, who are working towards establishing the organization. The important risk which should be focused on here, I will say management risk, because it is the responsibility of those who start the organization to make sure that the structures are in place, the policies are in place, which protect the organization as much as possible. I think myself I have been a co-founder of about 3 organizations in Ireland here. So when we started these organizations, what we did effectively was to put in place coherent policies, like how people join the organization, maybe developing the organization's governance documents, maybe also developing financial management policies, developing child safeguarding policies. One of the organizations that I was involved in setting up was an organization that works with children. And based on the legislation in Ireland, so you have to develop that kind of child safeguarding policy on how children will be protected, or how from volunteers and people who will be engaging with children within the organization. So I will say risks related to management procedures should be addressed first, because others can come later. All right?
All right, but then what about the financial risk, I think? Because for starting on an organization, you always focus on finances. You think that you don't have enough finance, or maybe you may lack finance to design your projects. I don't know, because I suppose we saw some risks, but they are all linked.
Yes, financial risk, these risks are interconnected. Yeah. The most important thing is for the management to put in place procedures in place. If those procedures are in place, when finances come in the organization, it will be easier, to avoid risks that are related to finances. But most importantly is to put in place those management structures which will ensure that the organization is not exposed to financial risk when finances start coming to organization. But I would say in terms of priority, the management risk should come, but where an organization must not ignore all the other risks, like financial risk, as you said, operational risk, environmental risk, all are very, very interconnected.
Okay, I don't know if there is another question from the participants. Otherwise, I have one question.
Yeah, me, I've got a question.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Jipe. Yes, I've got a question, and I think, well, it's a comment too. I think I totally agree with Jipe when he's saying that the management risk is very important to control really. Because let's say, so you were talking about policy on abused children or vulnerable people. I think it's important to also think of what are the system or the process. If now, so you have to do whistleblowing, who do you speak to? And then, so you need to have a management structure that allow you to go to somebody and to complain that such things happen. But at the same time, it's not only that, is you need to have a structure that very much protects you. Let's say, if one of the manager that you have to go and complain about something, he's the one guilty of, doing some things really. So you need to have a lot of management structure and rules in place. So I can say that yes, definitely I'm agree with Jipe on that.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Bala, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks. Any other question?
I think it's okay for now. You can maybe. I just have just one question. I think it goes also in the way that Bala was talking. Once you've identified all these risks and you have made priorities, what happens if you realize that you don't have the resources to address the risks? For example, for immediate actions.
Yeah, that's an important question. And as I said, it's a risk on its own due to the financial environment in which we are exposed to. So I know some adults are being supported by other organizations, other philanthropies, and it boils down to the question that you asked earlier, Clara, in which you said, what about maybe involving partners? Yeah. In a risk management workshop. So you can see it can be important to involve partners in a risk management workshop, because if there is a risk that is very pertinent that you have to address it immediately, and then you don't have the resources, partners have been there in the workshop, they saw it clearly that this risk is pertinent, it has to be addressed, but you don't have the resources to actually address it. So you can go back to the partners and say, look, this risk that we identified that can actually cause significant harm to the organization, we don't have the resources to address it. And sometimes they may be open to assisting you with the resources to address the particular risk. Yeah. But the reason for using this participatory learning action approach is to ensure that everyone is involved, from identifying the risk, analyzing the risk, monitoring the risk, controlling the risks. So if partners have been there in the workshops, so it is also their responsibility to make sure that the risk is controlled.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of good conclusion, saying that it's a participatory process, and the results should not be kept inside the organization, is what you say. How do you communicate on these results? Do you need to communicate? I mean, for your members, for
Definitely, of course, it's very important for key stakeholders to know what there is, because you cannot just identify them and then maybe, as I said, analyze them, then keep them under the carpet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is very important for everyone who is involved in the organization to know what are the risks the organization is exposed to, and it is everyone's responsibility to make sure that those risks have been addressed. So it's always important to communicate, to not externally, but internally. It is very important to communicate these risks as much as you can.
Okay. Is there any more questions, or it's fine? We have a thank you and greetings for the presentation. Will it be okay? The presentation will be put online, and we will add subtitles, because it's true that it was only in English for this time. I suppose that other people and participants that might watch this presentation after may contact you on the email address or phone or by the website that is written on this last slide. If they have more questions. And then, yes, it's a good question. When will there be a live training? Maybe you have already a live training session planned with our adept. Maybe you already have a session planned in Ireland or somewhere else?
Yeah, as we discussed, maybe just to make it clear, I introduced only about three tools. We have quite a number of them, and so as we discussed, there is a need for this training. I think we are there to actually develop it further and then provide it to members of ADDOs. Participatory learning and action training cannot be done, online as we are doing it now. So you guys could see it's even very difficult to actually explain how the tools they do work. So most of the times, if you do a live training with people, they can really understand how the process works. And one key important thing that I would like to mention here is the content of a training material, a participatory learning and training material, is only 20%. The consultant, the person who is facilitating the materials, contributes 80%. So how you actually facilitate it in the process matters more than the content that is being presented. So it's always very important to organize a kind of live training with people.
Okay, so
we are available maybe to organize that kind of live training. This one was just an introduction to training. So I think we've had a discussion on this, Clara, and we said maybe it can be May. I don't know, depending on the resources.
Okay, the resources, exactly. And so if you are interested, like participants for now or future participants, you can just call us or send a mail, and we will have more. I think the more participants we have, and the easier it will be to organize a training. So just feel free to express your interest for this training. Okay, I think we are done for this webinar. Thank you, Jipe. Maybe do you want to add something?
Not really, and thank you very much for participating. I really appreciate it. It also provided me the opportunity to be able to engage with you guys again. And thank you very much. And I'm there. Please feel free to drop me an email if you need any clarification, or if you want me to us to actually assist you, maybe in any of the elements, identifying your risks. I think we are there to help as much as we can. So thank you very much for participating.
Okay, thank you, Jipe. Thank you to all participants. And
thank you, Jipe. Thanks.
I hope we will see you all for the next webinar. Good evening. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.